Welcome to the Compendium podcast hosted by Leadership Books. In just moments, our host Michelle Smith will be joining us with a very special guest. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to Michelle. She's an award-winning marketing professional with years of experience in diverse markets. She is a 4-time published author and is also a seasoned publicist and national speaker. Michelle has appeared on Rachel Ray, ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox National News, Success Magazine, and many national radio programs. And she specializes in helping authors and business owners achieve publishing success. Won't you please welcome Michelle Smith?
Welcome to the Compendium podcast. I'm Michelle Smith, your host. I'm very excited to have Rick Davis with me here today. He's the author of The Furnace of Leadership Development, which cannot be more fitting in times like right now, but he's also a retired Battalion Chief and has served as a firefighter for 37 years. So thank you for that. And then also Rick has also been training on leadership and decision making. So we're very happy to have you here today, Rick. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So tell us about your book. Tell us about the book, what inspired you to write the book, and we'll start with there.
Well, the book, as you mentioned, is called The Furnace of Leadership Development. And the subtitle is How to Mold Integrity and Character in Today's World. And it came about after several years of encouragement from my wife and my daughters. And it started to pick up speed. And as a battalion chief, I'd visit the fire stations, and many times the conversations would, lean towards leadership. And often some of the troops would say, hey, you ought to write a book. You ought to write a book. And we got into 2017, and the conversation came up again here at the house. And my wife, Debbie, she said, hey, I heard a radio interview not too long ago, locally, a lady out of Denver who's helping people self-publish books. And so we searched, we found it. Her name is Polly Latovsky. And there's a lunch and learn tomorrow afternoon. And so what was very convenient is I had a monthly Chiefs meeting on Thursdays, and it was canceled. So we signed up for it. We went down, we met Polly, and we met another lady who was very instrumental in the formulation of the book, Susie Schaefer, who Susie's now down in Temecula in Southern California. She had to move back. And she has her own company, Finish the Book Publishing, and that's ultimately who we continued with. But we went down to the lunch and learn, and we talked to Susie and Polly afterwards, and it was just like bang, bang. I walked out of the restaurant, and I said, well, I guess I'm writing a book. and so they got me tied in with a editor and a writing coach. And I'm originally from New Jersey, and she's originally from New Jersey also, living here in Colorado. And we just really connected. Her name's Alexandra O'Connell. And so it just started, writing. And so the mechanics of the book, just a little bit over 2 years. And we launched last year on November 2nd. So why did I write the book? Well, coming back to the encouragement, and it's like, God has given me a gift to write, and I like to write. I've always liked to research and write ever since I was a little kid. But I felt like, I want to be able to share the lessons that I have learned throughout my life with others, those people that I'll never come in contact with, never, ever. And so it's based on my experiences throughout my life. And it started in high school. Unfortunately, when I was 14 years old, I came home from school one afternoon, and I found my dad dead on the floor from his 5th and final heart attack. And so, I cover that. And I also talk about a man that was instrumental in my life, my Uncle Cliff, who lived next door. Never stepped in to be my father, but he certainly performed an uncle's role. And for those who are listening, I want to encourage you. He was a big influence in my life. I want to encourage you. I did not realize how much of an influence he was in my life until many years afterwards, years after that he had died. So, for those who are listening and somebody that's influenced your life, let them know. Say thank you. Do it now while they're still alive. So then, Michelle, to continue, with the book, I've got chapters in there on integrity, which I believe is the foundation of leadership, trustfulness, honesty. I do have a chapter, very fitting. Tomorrow's Halloween. Chapter 3 in the book is called Organizational Monsters.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and I could come back to that then if you have a question on it. And then I have a chapter on anger as well. And as we go through the book, I have the final 2 chapters. One is on developing ourselves, and then the last chapter is on developing other people. But in between the chapters, there's short stories. And they're short stories related, to that particular chapter. And for instance, there is a short story called The Canoe, and it is about my Uncle Cliff. And he had a canoe, and he would take me out, canoeing with him. And so, that's really briefly, what the book is about. I wanted to write it from a practical aspect. Also, at the end of each chapter, there's bulleted points, for practical application. And I'm not putting down academia or anything like that, but my book is based on practical, application from my life, real world stuff that has taken place, dealing with real world issues. And I wanted to share those with others.
The problem with most online bookstores is that, as an author, you have no connection to your readers. You have no idea if your grandmother, competitor, or that perfect client bought your book. If this wasn't bad enough, you're not privy to the purchase record of those buyers in order to sell them another book, or service, or consultation. The book retailer kept your sales data as their proprietary information, and you're the big loser. Now, to add insult to injury, because you have no connection to your book buyer, there's virtually zero chance that you'll connect to make them a client, hire you as a speaker, or attend your online course, a mastermind group, or privately consult with you. It's a model that has failed you time and time again. However, with leadership books, you'll always have access to your customers. We at Leadership Books would be honored to list your book alongside some of the most prestigious authors of our time. Would you like to join us? Just click the link below to get started.
I think it's absolutely wonderful. I just think leadership in general is such an important topic today in our chaos. And I completely respect what you just said about telling your family member that you appreciate them and life is short. So I think that's fantastic. So in light of Halloween coming up, let's talk about the organizational monsters aspect of your book. I thought that might be a timely conversation. If you care to expand on that or even share a story, that would be great.
Sure, I'll expand on that. And what is funny related to that, I was over at the bank yesterday and I was having a conversation with the branch manager. And the conversation ultimately, led to leadership. And he was describing, an issue that he had in another branch in another part of Colorado. And he said the guy was a vampire. He said he sucked the life out of the team. And I started laughing. And I had a copy of my book with me. And I said, well, you'll get a kick out of this. And I flipped to chapter 3 and said, look. And he says, I see you have experience. I said, yeah, I do. There's a lot of organizational monsters, Michelle. And, I'm sure we could probably talk 2-3 hours on what creates them. Who creates them. And from my experience, many times, some of those organizational monsters, they are created by the organization themselves, because the organization, the leadership will not step in and address the problem. And the gentleman I was speaking to yesterday, he said that, he had worked for a large retail chain. He said the number one issue that he dealt with related to personnel were supervisors who did not write accurate evaluations. They refused to confront the employee, and they wrote it in glowing terms. Well, that's exactly what I inherited when I became a battalion chief. Is someone that had glowing, reviews written about him, but the behavior was completely different. And to top it off, I won't call it the icing on the cake, because icing is good, So,
Unless you're diabetic, but again.
yeah, unless you're diabetic. But the top it off is, these glowing evaluations, once I had the opportunity to read them, is they were written by people that I had heard complain about this guy. And it's like, are you for real? You've created this problem. You have built this Frankenstein. And that's how I lead into chapter 3. I paint the picture from the old, movie, the black and white movie of Frankenstein, when Boris Karloff was the original one. Yeah. And that's what exists in organizations. And, the Jekylls and the Hydes, I talk about those as well. The ones that the professional interviewers. I ran our recruiting program for 3 years here at Loveland Fire Rescue. And, and I've sat on, I don't know how many interview panels, whether it was for initial hiring of firefighters or, promoting people up through the ranks. And there are some real slicksters, out there. I mean, they come across really, really good, like I wrote in the book, is that, wow, we ought to hire this person. They're going to solve the peace problem in the Middle East, not only the Middle East, but the entire world, and they're so slick and so smooth. And then they come in, and they pass whatever probationary period that the organization has, whether it be 6 months, a year, and then bang, there they are. They turn into the bloodsuckers, just like the branch manager was telling me yesterday. But his experience was this person had been hired by someone else that had been planted in the branch. Here you go. This is a great guy. He's got a great background. He knows how to do this, this, and this. And he's licensed in this, this, and this. In other words, he's tactically proficient. But he could not get along with people. And so the branch manager was telling me that 2 weeks into this person working there, he had one of his most loyal, dedicated employees walk in his office and say, I quit. And the person won't say why. 2 weeks later, someone else, or shortly in that time frame, I may have gotten this time frame wrong, somebody else quit. And then when the third one quit, that person was finally honest. And it was, well, it's because what this guy is doing. It totally changed the work environment, and then he said it was difficult to get rid of this person because of human resources departments. They were afraid that there's going to be a lawsuit and so forth and so on like that. So that goes right back to the Frankenstein analogy. Organizations create their own monsters. So many times organizations are hypocrites. They say you've got to write accurate evaluations, and then people change them along the line. They say you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and then you've got people further up the line saying, well, now we can't do that because, Joe Schmuckatelli there might come back and sue us. And it's like, hello, you're creating the monsters.
Well, you've just completely solidified my reasoning for not working for corporate ever again. Rick, thank you. We're going to take a short break, have a message from Leadership Books, and we'll get right back to Rick Davis and his fabulous book.
Hi, I'm Ron from Leadership Books. Leadership Books is a premier book retailer and news source specializing in nonfiction books. Books that help its readers change their lives, business, community, and family. Our authors are some of the finest thought leaders in the world of business, finance, and faith. Take a few moments and check out our authors, and I'll give you $10 off your first order.
Welcome back. I have Rick Davis here, and he's talking about his fantastic leadership book. Rick, I think one question that our listeners would want to hear about is, how does your book play into leadership decisions today? We're in uncharted territory between fires, like we talked about, like offline, to pandemic, to there's a bunch of different, and civil unrest on top of it. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I do have a chapter on decision making, and throughout the book, I have a number of characters. People who are real and have been doing good leadership, most of them have been named with their real names. Others, I have assigned different names, to them, and to protect the innocent and to protect, the guilty, from that. And so, the chapter on decision making, it goes into the various type of people. There are some people out there that bang, they can make a decision right away. General George S. Patton of World War II fame said, "No decision at all is a decision." And one of the things that has always driven me nuts is people who can't make decisions, or they vacillate, they go back and forth. It's what the Bible characterizes it real well. It talks about people being tossed to and fro like the waves, and that does nobody any good, whatsoever. So I didn't delve a lot into decision making, in an emergency situation, which I want to add, although I spent all those years as a firefighter, my book is not specifically targeting, firefighters. My book is targeting, the people who are entry level to mid-level supervisors, or the folks that say, hey, I want to be, a supervisor. So it's not just, because I have had some people say, oh, geez, I'm not a firefighter, Rick. Well, you don't have to be, to read my book. But coming back to the decision-making aspect, I have done a considerable amount of research over the years on making decisions in a high stress emergency environment, revolving around situational awareness. And there's a very intelligent lady named Micah Ensley, and she identified 3 levels of situational awareness, being perception, comprehension, and then prediction. And I touched a little bit of that on the book, but I go more into the various characters, the ones that can make a solid decision. And one individual, Chris, back in June of 2000, we had a large wildland fire breakout in our jurisdiction. Started on a Monday morning. I was on duty that day. Tuesday, I got sent up to the fire. It blew up. We were all pulled back into our safety zones. And then over our radio channels, we heard a fire being dispatched in a different location. And this individual, he was the officer on the engine. And I call him Calm Chris because as he was coming up the road, he just very calmly got on the radio, called dispatch, and said, "Notify the sheriff, we need to evacuate Masonville right now. I believe the Bobcat Gulch fire has spotted in." And Michelle, it sounded just like he, as I describe it in the book, he pulled up to the drive-thru at McDonald's and ordered a cheeseburger, and a French fry and a Coca-Cola, just like that, which is what I, as a battalion chief, even before being a battalion chief, that's what I expected from people of our profession, not the yellers and the screamers, but there are the yellers and the screamers. And a lot of yellers and screamers exist in businesses. They don't have to be, in the fire department, the police department, and EMS agency. There's yellers and screamers in hospitals. There's yellers and screamers in retail. There's yellers and screamers, name it. They're out there, and they make things worse when it comes down to decision making like that.
Well, I agree with you, and especially just the perspective, decision making under pressure like that, and just to have it approach it with the hamburger ordering approach, that's just, I'm doing the right thing. I'm staying calm. I'm doing my job. So that's just, I think that's that's why I see how your book applies to obviously not just firefighters, but anyone in leadership. And I love the fact that you mentioned that people that are growing into leaders, because when I started my corporate career, I learned how not to manage people because I had a bad manager. And so versus being hey, here's how to do the right thing from day one, I just took this person and said, I'm not doing any of that. So I just, holistically, it's very important. So I have one.
Michelle, may I add real quick, just awesome for your listeners out there, if you want to listen to something that is absolutely perfect about making a decision in a stressful environment as calm, go to YouTube and pull up when Chesley Sullenberger and his first officer landed a great big chunk of metal in the Hudson River. And listen to that radio traffic between him and the air traffic controller. And when the air traffic controller is trying to send them over to Teterboro in Jersey, and he says, "Negative, we're going to go on the Hudson." And they're, repeat, and then the other pilot pops on, he said he's going to land on the Hudson. Just like that. It's oh, okay. I encourage people to look at that because that is decision making under stress. And if
Absolutely.
that guy can do that when a big piece of metal is coming out of the sky, there's no reason why we can't in a calm environment.
Oh, I agree. I agree with you. I think that story I'm very familiar with, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I can't even imagine like the stress and like the calm you're going to have to even like mitigate that situation. So one last question before we get to how we can find your fabulous book and what you're up to is you talk about integrity in leadership, and I want to get your thoughts on the importance of that and how that makes a more effective leader.
I had that as chapter 1 because I believe that is the foundation. And I described the soils here in our area of Colorado. A lot of it's bentonite, a clay-like material. Now, when we bought our house, that's one of the things that was concerning to me is what's the foundation like? Well, you know, they drill down, you know, they soak in the piers into, you know, bedrock. And so we don't have problems here in our neighborhood like you find in other areas of Colorado, that where that soil starts shifting and the foundations crack. I had a coworker several years ago that lived in a neighborhood that had those problems, and her foundation wall pushed in 2 feet.
Oh.
Well, you know, that's what happens when there's a lack of integrity. There's no foundation. There has to be a solid foundation to build leadership on. And this could be another 3-hour conversation.
Yeah,
just
talking for hours. This is great.
Integrity, you know, and where we see it and where we don't see it. And this even ties back into, you know, the slicksters, you know, the professional interviewers, you know, that they believe that, you know, in their mind, or other people believe that, wow, because they do something well, they've got integrity. You know, in the Marine Corps, terminology we use is someone who's technically and tactically proficient. Great. You know, but that doesn't mean that somebody has got integrity. So that is the basic, that's the cornerstone. That is the cornerstone of leadership. So I don't care how many degrees we have, how short, how tall, what our weight is, our skin color, and it doesn't matter. No. If we don't have integrity, we're not building our leadership on a strong foundation.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay, so what's next for you? Where can we buy the book? Are you speaking anywhere anytime soon? Please share with our listeners.
Well, what's next for me is, retirement was nothing more than just a designation and leaving Loveland Fire Rescue. You know, as you said, you know, I had 37 years in the fire service. Nearly 30 of them were here, you know, in Loveland. Started out in Jersey as a volunteer, and I did it in the Air Force and the Marine Corps. And so I determined a long time ago that, you know, I wasn't going to retire. I'm very fortunate, very blessed. My father died at 41. His dad died at 44. And so, you know, God has allowed me to live a full life. And so, you know, I think back in about 2012, you know, I really felt the tugging, the pulling from God that I wanted to do leadership teaching, speaking, you know, full time. Well, you know, it took a few more years and the timing came up. And so here I am. And I, you know, left the fire department on Sunday morning, May the 3rd. And then that following Saturday, I became a member of the John Maxwell team. And, you know, big leadership guy, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, Maxwell team has a huge presence throughout the world. And, you know, I told my wife, I said, wow, I'm part of a team again. You know, and since that time, I've become certified as a coach, speaker, and trainer, you know, with the Maxwell team. And so I'm working on my business. I've been working on my business full time, Impactus, Cultivating Today's Leaders. Although I started that in May of 2019, trying to build a business, working full time in the fire department, it was not working out very well. And so I am marketing the book, selling the book. And as I had one individual tell me, he said, hey, Rick, you know, you're not going to get rich selling your book, but what you got is a business card on steroids. You know, and so, you know, I have seen that. So I use the book in conjunction with marketing the business. So I've been out, I have taught, and, you know, COVID actually caused me to sit down and amend my business plan, because my initial business plan was, targeting an area of 125 miles radius from our city here in Loveland. But with COVID and everything going virtual, it's like, oh wow, now Michelle, I'm networking with people around the world. I mean, around the world. And I've recently taught a leadership class to a fire department, in another state. And so there's been some great opportunities there. The support that I received from the Maxwell team, it's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And the tips that I get. So on November the 18th, behind me are a number of books on the Civil War. And I started looking out for Civil War roundtables. Well, November the 18th, I'm addressing the San Diego Civil War Roundtable on the controversy between General George Meade and General Daniel Sickles at Gettysburg, which I touch on that in my book as well. And so those opportunities have popped up, and through my networking, even the other day, I have a tool that's called the Leadership Game. It's an assessment tool that can be brought into an organization, or teams, to help determine where they are at. And I had a local lady find out that I had that. She's like, okay, we need to talk. We need to talk about that. So, it's slow building a business, but I am there. And, people can reach out to me through my website, www.impactusleadership.com. My book is available through there. If someone desires to have an autographed copy of the book, they can go there. I do charge, for shipping though with that. Other than that, they can come to the, the Leadership Books website there, and also Amazon to get the book. People can reach out to me directly through my email, info@impactusleadership.com, or, I'll take a phone call, 970-290-3092. I love talking to people. So I love the topic of leadership, and I believe, we need to reach out to the people that are coming up behind us. And for those of you who are listening that are my age or getting close to my age or older, we have a duty and a responsibility. Don't neglect it. And that duty and responsibility is to influence the people that are coming up behind us. Take them alongside of you and teach them and train them. And if you find yourself in the Monday morning McDonald's coffee belly aching club, complaining about the young people, knock it off and get out there and help people and quit complaining about them.
Rick, thank you so much for your time. I could speak to you about leadership, and you are fantastic. Like, I could speak to you for hours about this. So for our listeners, check out his book, visit his website, reach out, because you have an excellent leadership resource here, to say the least. So thank you so much for being on our show, and I will be in touch very soon, because I'd love to have you on again.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. It's been a pleasure. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And be sure to visit us online at leadershipbooks.store. There you'll find the works of some of the finest thought leaders today. And be sure to tune in here each week to gain even deeper insights from one of those leaders on the Compendium podcast.